Video game influence is a very common topic within game studies and even the media. People often debate how video games influence violent or aggressive behavior, especially when there is a major media event such as a school shooting. Last year, the concept of the player influencing the game world was introduced to me. While I always had the concept of players influencing a game, I never thought about how much influence a player could truly have on a game, right down to the minute details. After playing games basically every day of my life since the age of 4, I feel obligated to argue my point of view that the game and the player influence each other evenly, specifically within certain games and modes involving multiplayer. I will even go so far as to prove it is this balance of influence that can make or break games. As you have probably noticed by now, there is gameplay to this video. Firstly, I would like to apologize if the video quality becomes subpar throughout any point in the video. I had to film this on my laptop as my PC is not currently working. I will make reference to the gameplay to help argue the points I make throughout the video. The gameplay consists of a game known as Smite, which belongs to the MOBA, also known as Multiplayer Online Battle Arena genre. Seeing as I have over 1,000 games played in League of Legends, 4,000 hours in Dota 2, and am gaining quite a few hours as well in Smite, I saw it fit to use gameplay from a MOBA as I am quite familiar with the genre. I use Smite for gameplay because it is the game I have been playing most often lately. The first point I would like to make is for the side of the player's influence on the game. My actions, as well as those of my lane partner, and the actions of the two players we are facing in our lane, resulted in the best possible scenario to occur for our lane. I just got a double kill as the biggest golden experience dependent character of my team, the concept of which I'll explain in a little bit. And even better for my lane partner, he didn't even die from the exchange. As a player, I now have a multitude of choices that I can make. However, only 3 major choices stick out in my. The first option is that I stay in the lane and continue to get gold and experience from staying in the lane and killing creeps, which leads to the risks of getting attacked by another lane or jungler. Now let's explain what another lane or jungler might have to do with all this. In MOBAs, there are 3 lanes and a jungle. The jungle is a neutral part of the game world where players often go in order to not only get gold, experience, and sometimes other buffs for themselves, they also allow a player on your team to get more golden experience by soloing a lane. Golden experience is divided among players within a lane, or a proximity of each other. The more players, the less golden experience for each one. Therefore, dedicating 1 player to the jungle allows your team to spread 4 players across 3 lanes. If I stay in my lane, at the current amount of health I have, I risk getting attacked by another lane or jungler, and more than likely. The second major option that I have is that I can be content with the gold I've obtained from killing the 2 enemy players and spending the money I've already earned to augment my character and get my health and mana back by going back to my base. Lastly, I could go farm the jungle, which is slower than farming the lane and also more punishing since the enemies in the jungle attack the player directly rather than allied creeps. Now imagine all of the options I just weighed in my own mind in that one instance alone, and imagine that occurring with all 10 players in the game at any given time throughout the game constantly and over the course of games lasting up to an hour. With all this in mind, it would be extremely hard to argue that each player being in a game over another player doesn't drastically change the outcome of the game because of the unique decisions that each and every player will make every second. The second example given is a specific example that illustrates a balance between player choice and forcing a player to adapt within each game. I've talked about gold a few times, so now I'd like to explain what gold does for a player and how a player earns it. Players earn gold within the game both passively and by completing objectives. This gold is spent by the player in order to purchase items within the game that augment the player. There are 3 types of items within the game. There are passive items, consumable items, and active items. There are over 100 different items in the game that a player can choose to purchase. Each different item augments players in a different way. For example, some items allow you to take less magic damage, some cause you to do more physical damage, some items give you more health, etc. Some items even give combinations of these stats. There is a balance between building items that you enjoy building, which changes from character to character, and building items which would benefit you more based on what the other team brings with their composition. If a player only builds items that they want, and not necessarily what they should build, then will be ineffective in dealing with what the other team brings to a fight, and vice versa. The third and final point I'm going to make is to show how the game influences the player. We've already discussed how different teams can force you to build different items in order to better deal with and counter enemy heroes, as well as complement your heroes. While item choices are one of the major ways in which the game forces the player to adapt in order to succeed, players are also forced to think and play a different way based on the god you picked, as all 62 gods have different abilities, leading to different strengths and weaknesses for each god. Every different character has different items that complement and are sometimes even necessary for making their skills more effective. The constantly varying strengths and weaknesses of each god force them to be played differently than every other god. Some gods even have extremely varying playstyles within the same role. Not only does the game cause the player to pick characters that are good for a given scenario in order to win, if you want to do well as that character, you must adapt your own playstyle in order to do well. I have gone over 3 different points that argue that the game and player influence each other evenly. I would now like to prove that it is this balance of the player and game constantly influencing each other in order to change the game's outcome that is necessary for the game's success. In order to do this, I will use some statistical analysis to help prove my point. What you are looking at right now is a graph that illustrates the last 10 games released across all platforms that have sold more than 15 million copies. The first thing I would like to point out is that all 10 of the last 10 games that have sold over 15 million copies were multiplayer. If you recall at the start of the video, I stated that the game and the player influence each other evenly, particularly certain games and modes involving multiplayer. I'd like you to keep this in your mind for a moment. It is my belief that creating an even or close to even balance between the player having some say in the world, be it through customization, story outcomes, ability to choose different missions or handle missions differently, etc., and the player being forced to change the way that they would handle scenarios and objectives throughout the game, create enough of a balance for a player that allows them to enjoy the game for longer. This is true because then the players do not get bored as quickly through repetition if they are constantly playing the game in different ways. Let's pull up that list again and go through some of the games to see how they have handled this. Going through the list, there is a great deal of Call of Duty, so let's begin with that. Call of Duty creates the aforementioned balance because it gives players the ability to choose not only which weapons they want to use, but allows them to customize their weapons through the use of skins to change the color and appearance of each weapon. However, players must also play differently based on the various game modes in the game, such as Capture the Flag, Demolition, Team Deathmatch, and many more. GTA was the most recently released game that qualifies for this chart, so we will look at this one next. Grand Theft Auto 5 gives you complete freedom in what you want to do with its world. The only time you have to play differently is when completing the optional missions. Aside from this, you can do anything you want. Lastly, we will look at the Pokemon franchise, which is widely viewed as a classic. Pokemon gives you complete freedom in which Pokemon you want to select as the 6 to be on your team, even allowing duplicates. The only time you have to play differently is when facing someone whose Pokemon counter yours, forcing you to change your Pokemon in order to beat the other player or NPC. We all remember facing Brock, the first gym leader in Pokemon Yellow. It was a nightmare, and it was damn near impossible if you did not catch some Pokemon in the forest prior to the gym. It seems that most successful games and franchises incorporate a balance between player choice and having to adapt, such as the one in Smite. And I think that in the multiplayer age we are in, people will only come to expect this more and more. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day and or night.